Here we are, ready to prep for my first venture as GM. This would be our fifth venture, and let's get started with that dice roll. Here we go. Well, let's see. First number we need to take a look at is there are no identical numbers, so that means that the adventure takes place in Roll-K. Now, let's take a look at our components. So we start with our black die. And our black is a 4, which means knowledge. That's our first component. Our second component is... hang on. 6, that would be a Herbaja interference. And do we have a third component? We do not. So finally, we take a look at our red die to get our tone, and it is a 3, so that is a grim tone. So again, our location is Roll-K. Our components are knowledge, Herbaja, and that's it. 2 components. All right. Well, now time to do a little bit of brainstorming. We'll be back soon. It has been about 2.5 days after I recorded rolling the dice. That was on Sunday at 1:30 p.m. It is now Tuesday, about 9:30 p.m. And I've spent that time, rereading the instructions for venture prep and brainstorming about the components that we rolled. I've come to realize that I think I misread and misunderstood the instructions for venture prep the first time around, and that caused me a lot of anxiety because I wasn't sure I was understanding the instructions. I was a little bit lost. I think, having reread them, that I now understand them more clearly, and I can now see how they resemble a lot my own usual method of preparation. But I'm open to critique, right? I'm hoping to get some critique and some pointers and things people would have done differently. And there may be very well be points where I completely misunderstood or made mistakes or broke rules. So, I'm open to critique. I hope to learn and do this better for next time. So, here we go. Okay, the location that we rolled was Roll-K, and our tone is grim, according to the dice, and it's 2 components. The first one is knowledge, and the second one is Herbaja interference. Now, I worked the components separately as instructed, and that was very helpful. It certainly was. It helped me keep them as separate as possible. So the first thing I did was brainstorm a location within Roll-K that I thought would be interesting. I came up with the village of Hoframstead, roughly meaning High Raven Steading. I envisioned this as a village on the mountain range to the very north of Roll-K, almost at what would be the border with Famberge. There's no set borders to these nations, but I would picture, that if Famberge is the northern woods, then this is the last mountain range before descending into the northern woods, according to the map in the book. So I'm calling that Famberge, at least for purposes of me keeping it straight in my head, what's going on. So there is a mountain fortress which holds a pass, which divides those mountains from Famberge to the north. This mountain fortress is held by a rival clan, not by the people of Hoframstead, which I have named Edmundburg. Just it's a like meaning rich, strong fort. I envision this village to the north is probably people of Famberge or a different clan of Rolke, which is larger and better equipped and richer than Hoframstead. The secret knowledge that I envision as a component is knowledge of secret mountain passes. There are people in the village of Hoframstead who know of these secret ways around the mountains, and this provides a strategic advantage to them. Particularly if anybody were to, venture a military expedition or something. These secret mountain passes also lead, if one wanted to assault this fortress, that might be one way to do it. So I'm thinking that this venture will take place in the spring, following a harsh winter. Given our grim setting, there's tragedy has struck the village of Hoframstead, and one of the storehouses for foodstuffs for the winter has burnt down. I imagine that this village is renowned for making goat cheese, and some of those cheeses have soured for reasons I'll explain later, and so resources are scarce. It's a tense situation for the people of Hoframstead. And the people are afraid that, if the winter has been harsh for them, it's probably been harsh for the people over at Edmundburg, and they fear a raid. They fear a raid may be imminent. So, our named characters for the village of Hoframstead and our knowledge of secret mountain passes, I envision a man named Gunther. Gunther is a freeman, an outdoorsman, who has knowledge of these passes. He's some sort of goat herder, and he's familiar with the outdoors and the mountain range, and so he has good working knowledge of these passes. What he envisions for this knowledge that he has is that he wants to convince the village chieftain that the people of Hoframstead should raid the mountain fortress and, take possession of it and, strike first against the people of Edmundburg before they have a chance to strike them in return. He has been scouting, and he has seen that, the people at the fortress, the garrison is small at this time. So maybe there's a window of opportunity there. So he figures, striking first is the best way to avoid a raid and securing the village. Opposite him is a merchant named Friedemann. Friedemann is also a freeman, but he is a merchant and also has training as a soldier. That's a martial law training. Friedemann is also a major figure within the village. He having experience with trade, and he holds some, economic power and martial power in the village. He has traveled. He's seen trade as the people of Spur conduct trade, and so he believes that it is trade that will see them safe, right? If he believes that they should take advantage of this mountain pass, but not for war and not risk, further violence, but rather, trading in the renowned cheeses of the region and pottery and baskets, and opening this northern pass to trade from Rolke to Famberge should be the way to go forward. This, instead of having Edmundburg raid, just share in the wealth that this trade should create for the region. It is a much more direct way into Famberge, rather than going around by sea and, braving the swamps at the coasts and stuff like that. That's described for the geography of Famberge. And so that's, freedmen would rather go about it, in a peaceful way. I'm envisioning that both these people, Friedman and Gunther, have like a small personal retinue. They would have Friedman probably has some sort of guards over his, his trading and his house, and he commands a small martial, contingent. And I should think that Gunther also has a contingent of outdoorsmen who, like him, herd goats, but also range the mountains, right? So they know this territory like the back of their hands, and this knowledge of the secret mountain passes is information that the people of Edmundburg do not have. So it is of great strategic advantage. So the third figure in this component is the chieftain himself, by the name of Adalbert. Adalbert is gentry, but he is old. He has grown old and is starting to go feeble-minded, so that he is reluctant to take any action in this moment, and is relying on the counsel of his, of the most important people, right? Most influential people in the village. So he is being passive and needs to be moved, and so he is the fulcrum, between which things swing, right? Between Gunther's we must move swiftly and attack, and Friedemann's trade is the answer here. So they must both compete to convince the chieftain of which course of action to take. And so that's basically the setup. I have some little more details thought. Well, not actually. That's about it. That's what I have to begin. The only other detail I'd have is probably the first scene opens up with Gunther having returned from his latest ranging, his latest scouting, figuring out that the fortress is not as heavily defended as they would think, and that the knowledge of the secret passes provides an advantage for them to strike now. So I think he's going to press his claim in this first scene, and of course Friedemann is going to be there to oppose him, and the Circle Knights will be in attendance, of course, as guests, emissaries from the young king. So, what happens from there is what we don't plan, right? It all depends on who is there and why they're getting involved in this, if they are getting involved at all. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the guys bring to the table and what happens. So the map that I'm going to be using is the mountain fortress that Ron provided for us in the book. It's a map. I don't expect them to necessarily go there, but in the event that somebody wants to go along with a raid, but at least we have a map and have an idea of what's going on. But again, I don't even expect them to go on a raid. I think the drama, the soap opera, as Ron would say, is these two opposed factions of Gunther and Friedemann trying to get their way in different approaches to the people of Edmundburg up in the mountains, right? And seeing who can convince Adalbert, the clan chief. And the final element in this component is the tripwired. I think that the tripwire I'm going to go with is, if Gunther is killed, then Edmundburg attacks Hoframstead. I don't know if that... I don't know. I kind of feel that if this plan goes wrong, and if for some reason the players decide to kill Gunther, then it just goes disastrously, and it just precipitates an attack from Edmundburg. Maybe Gunther was right all along, and Edmundburg is only waiting, is about to launch an imminent attack on the village. or if somehow Gunther goes along with the raid. Maybe if he goes by himself, he gets himself killed in the raid. I don't really know how I'm going to handle a raid if the player characters decide to accompany him or something. But it could just result in the death of Gunther, and if that happens, I'm thinking, Hofremstedt gets attacked. Even if Friedemann gets his way, maybe that attack is averted. I don't know. It's half formed in my mind because I don't want to go too far. I just think if Gunther is killed at some point, that probably just precipitates, the raid is unopposed because there's no scouts to go stop it in time. It's what came to mind. That's probably one of the things where, I hesitated. Should I ask Ron directly for advice? And then I figured, let's try and do this just by reading the instructions in the book. And because I've heard Ron speak about the importance of the text. It doesn't really matter what the author's intent is. What does he actually communicate in the rules? And this is, of course, filtered by the reader's interpretation, right? So I fully could be misunderstanding how the tripwires work. I could be fully, it could be all on me and not a failure of the author to communicate his intent. But that this is something I'd be curious to hear some feedback about. Is this a proper tripwire? I think the reason I think it is because it doesn't presume that he will get killed. I don't presume that the players following Edmund's way is a correct way or the wrong way. If it happens, I think that triggers that. I toyed with the concept of maybe having it be if Adalbert dies, but I have no idea how Adalbert would die under these circumstances. So that's what I went with. If Gunther gets killed, Edmundberg attacks. Now I have statted the NPCs up according to the rules. Adalbert gets a brawn of 2 because I figure he's old and weakening in his old age, and his wits is 2 because I think he's gotten a bit addled by old age. Maybe he's going senile. However, I gave him a charm of 8 because I kind of picture him as a beloved figure within the town of Hofremstedt. Everybody likes Adalbert, and so charm 8. Gunther, first Friedman, our trader, our merchant, gets a brawn of 2, a quickness of 5, wits of 8, charm of 4, and Gunther is the character that I'm gonna use the highest sum of the Circle Knight attributes to stat out, just in case I started working with the allotted 19 points that Ron describes in the rules. So preliminarily, I gave him a brawn of 5, a quickness of 8, wits of 4, and charm of 2. But that is, of course, subject to, the lowest knight attribute is 21, so at least it gets 2 extra points, and as much as 8 extra points, depending on which character gets picked. But our characters so far have attributes adding up. I believe it's 21, 27, 24, and 26. Those are the different totals available. So I'll adapt Gunther whenever they pick characters. So now on to the second component, which is Arbaja interference. Now, we've had a bunch of Arbaja interferences in the past, and I wanted something a bit different. I started looking around the monster sections and the demons, wizards, stuff like that, and I came across one of the demons. It's the dancer demon statue. The game tells you that these demons, they are like emotional cancer, I believe is the description that Ron gives. It's pretty poetic. Like, they're always in motion. They have no further. They just to pick an emotion and just, grow and grow uncontrolled, and there is no order. There is no stopping it. It just grows exponentially and uncontrollably until it consumes you, which is a fairly accurate description of what cancer does to you. So I drifted the basic dancer demon statue from the description. I want to keep the actual description of what it does. The whole, if blood is shed in its presence, it's going to, manifest and attack. And it also kind of ramps up. Let me see if I can look it up just to double check this real quick. Because it also ramps up emotions. If there's a social interaction in which the statue is present, the charm rolls are affected, and unnamed people become touchy and react angrily to perceived provocations. So I'm going to take that a step further, and I'm envisioning that these statue, I'm changing the description. I'm thinking it looks like sort of like a Penanthuri, sort of prehistoric goddess statue, like one of those Earth Mother primitive statues that you see where it's like an overweight female figure made out of stone or something like that. So it's a small statuette. And that's what I think of as the statue. And it's going to serve a couple of purposes. Not only is it going to do the whole violence thing, being a thing of Herbaja, it's also going to exacerbate some other passions, as we'll see. So my name characters, I'm supposed to pick 2. And, it does admonish you, if you need an extra name character for this venture, you might as well put it in. And I did so already with the first component, right? It was supposed to be 2, and I thought originally of Gunther and Friedemann, and then I figured the clan chief has got to be named. He's got to be important in this, so I made up Adalbert. But now, for the name characters related to the Herbaja Interference dancer statue, I'm going with 3 name characters again, and I hope you'll see why, because I like triangles. This one is a love triangle. It's a goat herder, a poor goat herder in the village who's also the village priest, named Dietmar. Dietmar is, young. He's taking over the duties of being a priest for the village. He grows the cannabis and the conducts the ceremonies and dispatches the dead and stuff like that. But he also works as a goat herd, and he's not doing well. His resources are limited. Situation is desperate. His goats are dying. He's got less goats than usual, so his prospects are not good. In one of his goat herding through the mountains, he finds some ruins which he believes to be Penanthuri, and there he finds the statuette of the Earth Mother, right? Actually, the dancer demon statue, but he doesn't know what it is, so he thinks it's a Penanthuri thing. He takes it to the location which I have come up with to associate to this component, and that is a small grotto, a small cave complex, right? I'm not picturing too many caves, just a small single cave, hidden in a small grove of pinewood trees, right, in the village proper. So it's a grove and a grotto. And I think he tends to this grotto and this grove. Maybe he I don't know, grows mushrooms or grows herbs there for his priestly functions. And it's sort of a holy place for the village of what was the name of the village? I forgot already. Hufframstead. So it's sort of a holy place, but it's not used every day. It's used for special occasions. So, but he comes and goes to this grove, and so he has taken the statuette and placed it in the grove itself, believing he's tapped into some form of the ancient gods of the Penanthuri, right? And so, he's kind of incorporating that into his worship as a priest, right? Into his function as a priest. But the statuette has started to, exert its corrupting, malign Urbaja influence upon him. And so, it has inflamed his lust for the second named character in this trio, Ingrid, wife to a local wealthy cheesemaker by the name of Oswald, who is our third element in this situation around the statuette. Dietmar's lust has become inflamed for Ingrid. Oswald, who is Ingrid's husband, is a fat, older farmer who makes, a renowned goat cheese throughout this area. This goat cheese thing sort of ties into the first component where Friedemann wants to do trading with the cheese and stuff like that, but not directly. I'm trying to keep them separate, but they do live in the same village. So, it makes sense that one of the wealthy farmers, all three of these people in this component are peasants. One of the wealthiest farmers should be this Oswald, who makes the cheese, right? So he's wealthy by this community's standards and has wed Ingrid, who is a young and fair woman who has come from a poor family. So it's basically a marriage of convenience for Ingrid. And, it's loveless, at least as far as Ingrid is concerned. Not as far as Oswald is concerned, but, the thing is that the dancer statuette has inflamed their passions, both Dietmar's and particularly Ingrid's. And, being a female demon manifestation, it has sort of focused its malign influence upon Ingrid. So she is the fulcrum between Dietmar and Oswald. There's a particular bond between Ingrid and the statue. So since Ingrid is unhappy with her marriage, she and Dietmar are going to try to consummate their love, keeping it secret from Oswald. Setting up the possibility of people discovering infidelities and, things escalating beyond dark passions to maybe violence, which also feeds our demonic statue. So, again, I'm not trying to plan much of this, but there is the admonition to set these immediate needs surrounding this component of the statue. So I think this works. That's another question for Ron and for feedback. Are these, first of all, am I having too many components? The rules do say to, if you need an extra named NPC for a component, go ahead and do it. But it feels like 6 is quite a bit. I hope it works. There is also the second idea that I have to, or that I should, as the GM, introduce these named characters either in the first scene or among the first scenes To that end, I believe that at some point after our first scene, which, as I said, is, Gunther coming back and having the discussion with Adalbert regarding the possible raid upon the mountain fortress, then maybe after that meeting, at some point, one of the PCs or both catches a glimpse of Ingrid sneaking off into the grotto to meet Dietmar. So maybe they follow. Maybe they just stand and watch. Maybe they catch the lovers. But I don't know. It depends on what they do. Maybe they don't take the bait. But at least, catching a glimpse of Ingrid going into the grotto will allow me to introduce the other named characters, right? Because I can say, well, that's Ingrid. You know her as the wife of Oswald. And she's gone into the grotto, which is weird because nobody goes to the grotto except Dietmar, who's the priest, right? And, that provides me an opportunity to doing, some introduction of what's going on. So, but again, I'm not expecting them to do anything. Maybe they'll just ignore this component and move. I need to check the rules to see, if the wizards can sort of, smell the Urbaja or smell the demon in some fashion, detect them in some way, because I should be prepared for that. My next step after completing this video is to reread the rule book again, the entire book, with special attention to the GM facing, portions of the rules, right? So I can have those front and center, because I think I have a basic grasp on the rest of the game, having played it a couple of times and having read and reread my rule summaries, but not for the GM's point of view. So I need to brush up on that. So, I statted out my people. They're all peasants. Dietmar is a peasant, farmer, goat herd, and priest. Ingrid is a peasant goodwife, and Oswald is a peasant farmer or cheesemaker, right? Dietmar's stats, in case this escalates, brawn 4, quickness 8, wits 2, and charm 5. Ingrid is brawn 2, quickness of 4, wits 5, and charm 8. Everybody likes the good wife Ingrid, partly because she's very beautiful. And Oswald is difficult to stat. I'm thinking of a fat older man, so I gave him a brawn of 8, a quickness of 2, a wits of 5, and a charm of 4. So he's not very handsome, but he's still social character, right? He's sociable, so a charm of 4 is not too bad, right? So that's the stats for them, and these won't get affected. The only ones whose stats are going to change is Gunther. And the trigger for this second component is if Ingrid is killed, Dietmar will seek revenge by murdering Oswald and whoever killed Ingrid. The death of Ingrid being the focus of the statue, right? The focus of attention of the statue will just escalate the influence of Urbaja, and it will just drive Dietmar to violence, and Oswald as well, right? It could be either, Dietmar seeking to murder Oswald, or Oswald seeking to murder Dietmar, or they want to kill each other, or whoever killed Ingrid is also a target of whoever is still alive from this triangle. Because hopefully this escalates into a bad cycle of violence, and if it's in the presence of the statue, better, because that activates the statue and makes it act in combat, and makes the demon manifest. But even if it doesn't, I feel like the death of Ingrid just unleashes this escalation of Urbaja, which eventually, at some point, results in the creation of an Urbaja zone, and this is bad for the young king in Rolke. So if this tripwire gets triggered, then it might end badly for the young king. So we'll see how it goes. And I think that's about it. Again, I think I did this prep correctly, but I will welcome any feedback and criticism. So anyway, this video has gone on long enough. I think it's 35 minutes, and now I'm looking forward to seeing how this runs. I'm going to reread all the GM rules, and hopefully we'll get to play this venture number 5 pretty soon. So thanks for listening. Bye-bye.